I wish you all a very happy Ambedkar Jayanti as you have assembled here to celebrate his birth anniversary at Calgary in Canada. I take this opportunity to extend my appreciation to the members and office bearers of the Ambedkarite International Mission Society in Canada for organizing this event. It is important to also point out here that I had known late Mr. Rajiv Kamble, for whom I have very high appreciation for work that he did not only in India but also worldwide. So in that connection, I also pay my tribute to him. I had few occasions to interact with him during his visit earlier in Delhi, and that's how I fondly remember him today while we are celebrating Ambedkar Jayanti at Calgary. And for that purpose, I have been invited to speak. So I would extend my heartful gratitude to Miss Kathleen, who took this much of trouble to get me involved in this process of celebrating the Ambedkar Jayanti at Calgary by asking me to speak on this occasion. So I am very thankful to Miss Kathleen, and I express my gratitude to her so that I could be speaking to you, though virtually, but I am very happy that I am part of this process today. And let me start by saying that whenever I read Annihilation of Caste written by Babasaheb, I always feel that this book is not an old book. It must have been written some year ago. In that connection, what makes the book so relevant even now is the fact that the manner in which Dalits are still being treated in India, and for that matter even in other South Asian countries. It's a matter of great concern. The manner in which the society at large treats its own citizen is not only a matter of concern here in India, but also worldwide, in a sense that there are other people who face similar kinds of discrimination, exclusion and violence in other countries as well. So in that sense, this is not a typically Indian problem that we are dealing with even now, say 75 years ago, when Babasaheb wrote Annihilation of Caste. So from that perspective, I feel that Babasaheb is relevant even now, say 75 years later, when India has already completed the 75 years of its independence, and also we are very close to celebrating 75 years of a democratic governance after the inauguration of our constitution in 1950. So in that connection, I would also like to quote Babasaheb's speech which he gave in 1949 in the Constituent Assembly of India, when the constitution, at least a part of it, was being adopted on 26 November 1949. I am quoting from his speech only to remind ourselves that the process of social and economic democracy has still not started in this country, and why we must listen to what Babasaheb had forewarned on that day in the Constituent Assembly of India. So here is a quote with which many of you are familiar already, but I'll reiterate the point that Babasaheb made and why India needs to pay attention to it more than when it was delivered in 1949. And the quote starts here, which says, from 26 January 1950 onwards, we are going to enter into a life of contradiction. In politics, we will have equality, we will have one vote, one value, but in society and economy, we will still have inequality. We must bridge this gap as early as possible, or else those who suffer from inequality will blow up the whole structure which we have so laboriously built up. See, the guiding idea of writing the constitution for a newly independent state in 1947 and post 1947 phase was the idea of creating an egalitarian society based on the notion of liberty, equality and fraternity. But how far we have travelled from 47 onwards up till 2024, if we look into the government figures, there is nothing to cherish about as far as the Dalits and Adivasis are concerned in this country. You know, in a typical situation, the primordial social violence should not be replicating itself in modern times. But what we have seen in this country is that year after year, the violence, the social violence, the human right violations of Dalits and Adivasis have continued unabated. It's not something which is very surprising in that sense, that, like, you know, from even if we see from the time of, say, for that matter, when the Prevention of Atrocity Act was introduced in the Parliament in 1989 and it was adopted in 1989, and up to 2022, when we see the figure of atrocities being committed against Dalits in this country, it has already crossed 1 million. It is not a surprise in that sense, and specifically in last 10-15 years, the manner in which the atrocity figures are rising, it's not something which surprises a Dalit human rights activist like me, because I have been observing the cases of atrocities. I myself have been involved in various fact-finding studies, and I have also been involved in advocacy at national level and also international level. So, in that sense, I am not surprised that why atrocity cases are rising year after year. And believe me, it has not only crossed 1 million, I mean more than 10 lakhs cases have already been reported in last say 30-40 years. So, even if we see the last figure for which the data is available, that is for 2022, it has already crossed 57,000. So, from that point of view, it may be a surprise for others who may not be familiar with the ground reality in India, but for those who are involved in Dalit human rights advocacy, they know that the more Dalits assert for their rights, there will be more retaliation from those who practice the caste system religiously. So, I was reading Annihilation of Caste, and I found that Babasaheb had mentioned about a village in Rajasthan called Chakwara. In 1936, there was an atrocity case in which Dalits were targeted, Dalits were ostracized, Dalits were beaten up for daring to break the tradition of the Indian caste system, in which Dalits have no right to celebrate or to even have good food in that sense. In 2001, I was not surprised when Chakwara was again in the news. The case which Babasaheb was mentioning in Annihilation of Caste happened in 1936. But in 2001, two young men from Dalit community, Babulal Bairwa and another person, they broke the tradition and drank water from the village pond. And the caste Hindus were very furious. They beat up the Dalits, they imposed fine of 50,000 rupees on these two Dalit youth for breaking the traditional norms of that society, of that village, and nothing happened ultimately, in a sense that none of the accused got any punishment from the police and the courts. So in that sense, it makes me feel as if there is no scope for justice for Dalits and Adivasis in this country, and one may wonder why it happens. See, if we look into the factors which are still operative in our society, economy and polity, it will not be difficult for us to understand that why such kind of violence still happens in our society. And the fact that the police and the judiciary also do not offer much solution to this problem is another aspect which we must talk about, because it is only by highlighting the problem areas in our administrative and judicial setup and the criminal justice administration that we will be able to find solutions to the problem which has been a recurrent feature in our society. It is not something which happens once in a while, it happens on everyday basis, that somewhere a Dalit is being targeted, a Dalit being is abused, or a Dalit women being raped even. So in that kind of bleak scenario, what could be the silver lining of finding a solution to the problem? So in that sense, what I feel is that the manner in which our judiciary works, the manner in which our police and administrative system works in this country, we need to intervene positively to see to it that the impunity, the casteist and the institutionalized impunity that the perpetrators have been enjoying in this country is not allowed any longer, and we must fix the accountability of the state and the society at large, and from that perspective it is very necessary that we should talk about it, with full figures, and also force the government to take into account the need for bringing change in the way the country is being run. So from that perspective, it is necessary that we highlight the need for social and economic democracy, because political democracy would always remain meaningless if there is no social and economic democracy. So while celebrating the Ambedkar Jayanti, we should reiterate our commitment to establish an egalitarian society based on the notions of liberty, equality and fraternity, which I am afraid will remain only on paper if the corrective measures are not initiated by the government and society at large. So being a human rights advocate, I always feel that for any democratic governance, there are three important elements that we must look into while we are assessing their performance, while we are assessing their utility in addressing the people's grievances. And the three important elements are like this: firstly, that there should be constitution and set of legislations; secondly, due diligence; and thirdly, accountability. So what we have seen in this country is that we have a very modern constitution which guarantees rights for everyone, irrespective of caste, creed, religion, etc. But what is missing perhaps is the fact that there is no due diligence and there is no accountability. So if the officials are not implementing the law properly, nothing happens to them. Even the perpetrators of crime, who violate human right of Dalits and Adivasis in this country, they go scot free. What does that mean? That there is an inbuilt impunity into the system, that even if a case comes up for hearing at the High Court level or at the Supreme Court level, we don't seem to be getting justice. for the victim and the survivor's family. I'll give you an example of two, three cases here to highlight the fact that even judiciary in that sense has failed to deliver justice. The first case was a case about which I read in the newspaper last year, that it took 42 years for a local court. Just imagine 42 years for a local court to deliver a justice. An incident in which 10 Dalits were killed in the state of Uttar Pradesh in 1981, and the judgment was delivered in the year 2023, in which the incident of killing in which 10 Dalits were killed by the caste Hindus, only one surviving accused has been penalized now with a life imprisonment. I mean, what does that mean? Why should it take 42 years to deliver a justice in a case? Similarly, I will talk about an incident in which 16 Dalits were killed at Kumher in Rajasthan in 1992, and the judgment was delivered by the SC/ST Special Court in last year. 32 years later, a judgment was delivered. But what happened after that delivery of judgment by the special court, in which 9 people were life imprisoned? They got the punishment of life imprisonment. So when the matter was challenged by those accused in the High Court has acquitted them. What does that mean? The experience so far in this country has been that there is very high percentage of acquittals and very relatively low percentage of conviction in the cases of atrocities when it comes for hearing at in the courts, and that's really a matter of concern. The judiciary, the higher judiciary, should look into this matter very carefully and also see to it that the judgment which is delivered by the judges, the honorable judges, they should look into the issue of atrocity in a very impartial manner. But at times it does feel that the caste system and its pernicious influence has also affected the judiciary, the police and the administration, because and the only reason for this is that the roots are very deep. The casteist mindset and attitudes gets reflected in everything that they do, people that they do in the society, in economy and polity. So in that sense, one cannot say that untouchability and atrocity cases happens only in rural areas. In that sense, it happens in urban areas as well. The magnitude of the problem or the degree and the form in which it is practiced may vary from place to place, but there is no place where people can say that we don't believe in caste, we don't practice caste. So in that sense, it is very surprising that government always makes a claim that India is shining, India is incredible, but our experiences so far says that all these claims are very deceptive, because until and unless the caste system is annihilated completely, there is going to be no justice for Dalits and Adivasis in this country, or for that matter in South Asia, because India is not the only country which is affected by the caste system. All the South Asian countries and in several other parts of the world, we see similar kinds of social system that they have, where a section of its own people of their society are treated in a manner which is very similar to what is faced by the Dalits in South Asian countries. So from that perspective, it is practically impossible for any country to deliver justice to the Dalits and Adivasis until and unless the caste system is completely annihilated. There is no other way. And I take this opportunity to also reiterate the fact that if the world or for that matter India, has to play a leading role in addressing the issues related to caste-based discrimination, exclusion and violence, it must follow the path of Buddha and Babasaheb Ambedkar. I shall end here by repeating a slogan which I have been hearing since many years in Delhi and in other places in this country, which goes like this: जब तक सूरज चांद रहेगा, बाबा तेरा नाम रहेगा. That means as long as there is a sun and the moon, Baba Saheb, you shall always be there. So I end here by quoting what Buddha said, may all beings be happy. Thank you very much.